Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. We're fired up. You're here with us on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. And this is quickly becoming the busiest news week in the college football calendar. We got a lot to get to over the next 2 hours, and we'll try to chew on as much of it as we can. Glen West is going to be with us from Go 24/7 at 1:30. We'll mainly talk football with Glen, a little bit of basketball as well. We're going to talk with Sonny Shipp, also of Go 24/7 at 2:15, to talk about all things that are going on in the roster building world. I hesitate to even call it recruiting because it is high school recruiting, and then there's roster retention, and there's transfer portal, and all those type of things. The portal's not even open yet, but folks are certainly making their intentions clear. So we'll talk to Sonny about all that at 2:15. It's National Signing Day comes up tomorrow for the high schoolers. Sharif Ishak, WDSU, will be with us to talk all things Saints and Little Pels. At the bottom of hour number 2, we've got Will Campbell declaring for the NFL draft, and I've got some thoughts on some of the other guys that have a decision to make over the next few weeks for LSU college football playoff rankings tonight. You get the picture. I didn't even mention the fact that LSU and Florida State are playing basketball. I'm going to talk about that in 15 minutes, but there's just a ridiculous amount to get to here over the next 2 hours. So go ahead and lock us in. We'll start the same way we start each and every day. That's with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Okay, LSU football Twitter is not in a great headspace. LSU football message board folks, whether that's subscription-based or otherwise, are not in a great headspace. There's been a lot that has been put on this high school signing class that LSU staff had worked to assemble over the last really 3 years. And it still looks very good on paper. It looked better on paper 2 weeks ago. Of course, the news of Bryce Underwood decommitting was gutting to LSU staff, to the program, and to the fan base. Earlier today, Cade Phillips, a 5-star defensive back that LSU had worked to flip away from Texas in August, decided he was flipping back from LSU to Texas. You've got Jakeem Stewart, who's reclassified, and a lot of folks feel is trending towards Southern Cal. And I think there are a lot of people in LSU land, not necessarily the staff specifically, they've got more information than we do, but most people who follow the program, whether fans or folks that cover the team, that are like, this is an absolute disaster for LSU. And I completely understand that sentiment. Having a commitment for a year from the number one player in the nation at the most important position in all of sports and losing them at the last hour is brutal. You realize what LSU's got to do in the secondary to get where they're trying to be and get back to the run that LSU was on over the course of almost 2 decades of grabbing 5-stars from all over the country, put them in the defensive secondary for 3 years, churning out Thorpe Award winners, All-Americans and first-round picks, and becoming DBU. And they haven't been that for a few years. And you felt like when you brought back Corey Raymond, there's a good chance that you could continue on that path. And DJ Pickett's name's been rumored about here and there, and most people say he's going to be locked in, but how can you trust anything that any of these young men are doing at this point? It's a really difficult situation that they're in, and from the outside, it's gut-wrenching to sit there and watch. But Cade Phillips is committed to one place, and then committed to another place, and then committed back to the other place. And that hurts your ability to put together that class that had 2 5-star corners and the number one corner in the state of Louisiana in Aiden Anding. And then Jakeem Stewart, who was the number one player in the nation in the junior class and is now reclassified. That guy gets away from South Louisiana. When those things happen, it's devastating to LSU fans when Joe McKnight leaves and when Landon Collins leaves and Greg Robinson leaves. And you know the names of the guys from the state of Louisiana that have gone on to other places. And when those guys don't commit to LSU, it's jarring to LSU fans. And I get all of that emotion that goes into this. I changed personally my investment in the world of high school recruiting like 7, 8, 9 years ago. Like when I was in high school and college, I mean, I was locked in. Give me all the information. Tell me everything you know. This is do or die. This is the way you have to build your program. LSU's really good at it. That's why they're competing for championships. This is the most important thing to pay attention to. And I stopped because you've got high school kids throwing hats all over the place on tables and flying in out of airplanes and decommitting on the last day without the staff knowing anything. And I'm going, okay, here's how I feel about recruiting now. Tell me about it when the ink dries. I don't care what socks they wore to camp. I don't care who had the last visit. I don't care what their girlfriend's car is on Instagram. Like that stuff is not important to me. Recruiting is, but let me see when the ink dries. That's the way I feel about it. And now that we've gotten into this NIL era, and just look at Hayes Fawcett's feed right now for On 3. He's got all these graphics up, and there are flips every 15 minutes. There was one today from Miami to Oregon. There was one today from Auburn to Michigan. LSU and Texas have been involved in multiple Cade Phillips. It's not just LSU that's losing players. It's the ones that we care about, but it's not just LSU. It's all over the country. And we're now at the 11th hour, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going on right now. There are collectives that are just moving money around, and that's the most powerful thing here. And when you're dealing with young people, 18, 17-year-olds, in these amounts of money, you're going to get mind changes. I had a conversation over the last 2 weeks with someone who played college football 15 years ago. And I said, was anyone on your team like really they have a ton of money? Just obviously have a ton of money. And he said, not really. Like there were guys that were getting $3,500 here, $1,700 here, $1,000 here. You got a job and you might have gotten a little bit more. But there was money involved. And certainly, trust me, if someone had handed me $3,500 cash when I was a freshman at LSU, that would have been jarring to me. Now we're dealing in the millions. It's a different world. There are millions of dollars on the table. And I don't know this because I didn't talk to everyone who played college football 15 years ago, but I did have one conversation with a player. And like nobody had $1.5 million for the time between October and Christmas. Like that wasn't happening. You couldn't hide that well enough. Like Reggie Bush is a famous situation. I'm not suggesting it never happened once. I'm suggesting it was far out of the norm. And now you've got this happening, and these flips are going to happen all across the country, all over the place. And I feel like LSU's probably going to be on the short end of it more often than not, and that's a discussion that we need to have. But now I've completely shifted on all this because it's like Cade Phillips is not going to come to LSU. But if you lose Cade Phillips and Jakeem Jackson, who was once a high four-star corner, who's 2 years older and was a starter for Florida for the first 2 games this year, transfers over to LSU, that's what and what to me. Like, I don't know if Cade Phillips is any good. He probably is. Jakeem Jackson's probably good. It's all about roster composition at this point. Because the thought that we had that if you get a high schooler, you'll have him for 3 or 4 years and you can develop him in the program. So it's better to go to the high school ranks than it is to go to the transfer portal where you're getting mercenaries for a year. It's rooted in truth, but can you really be sure you're getting the high school kid for more than 1 year? Can you? No. So it's just year to year. I mean, basketball is already like this because you're only dealing with 9 guys that play anyway, and you'll just go get the next 4 in and go to get the next 4 the next year, and they're everybody's in the portal. And we already knew this about basketball. And baseball, to an extent, LSU's going to bring their high schoolers in, but they're going to go and they're going to supplement it with some high-end guys out of the transfer portal. Football, we kind of thought was a little bit closer to the old model, when you're at a place like LSU and you can bring in 25, 4 and 5 star players. But these guys, it behooves them financially to bail on their school or their commitment every single year. That's the best way to open the treasure chest. And we need to ditch the word commitment because it doesn't exist anymore. We can go with intention. We can go with, there is no commitment. Very, very, very rarely. These guys are flipping. They come for a year, they leave. They play 4 games, they redshirt. They're out of there. Like, it's a different world. And so for me, it's not going to change personally my investment when LSU comes out of the tunnel. When LSU comes out of the tunnel, I'm ready to go. I don't care how much the right tackle's making. I don't care how much the other team's running back's making. I don't care about any of that stuff. When LSU comes out of the tunnel, I'm ready to watch them play football. I will be every bit as emotionally invested in that Clemson game next year as I was for Alabama this year. That's just the way that I'm wired. But as far as recruiting goes, just show me what the roster looks like for Clemson. I can't get invested in 5-star cornerbacks. I can't get invested in 5-star quarterbacks. I can't get invested in 3-star running backs. I can't even get invested in the way that a young player plays and what they may look like down the road because there's just, CJ Daniels said last week to The Advocate, it really behooves me to come back. The portal's not even open yet, and he's in it a week later. So I can't follow that as religiously as I once did. We'll write about it. I'll talk about these guys for you. But as far as my emotional investment goes, like, it's still, roster building is still the most important piece in collegiate athletics. Kirby Smart said it. He's right. Players win games, not coaches. The way that you get these players now is so wildly off the wall and so backroom that how am I supposed to even fake like I have any clue what's going on out there or that I know what the environment's going to be like hour to hour, not day to day or month to month, literally by the hour. I can't do it. So for me, show me the guys they've got on scholarship for the next year. And right now, I don't really know much about LSU's team next year, so I can't forecast a ton about it. But got to get as many of these highly ranked high school kids in as you can, and you got to hit the portal really hard. And as everyone's been saying for a long time, you have to spend a bunch of money. And Brian Kelly can't spend his money, and Joe Sloan can't spend his money, and Blake Baker can't spend his money, and Frank Wilson can't spend his money. They've got to go to the boosters in the collective and take what money they have, determine what players they can get with that amount of money, and put the best product on the field they can do. And I can't even pretend to know what those conversations are like, what amount of money is ready to be given out, and how close they're missing out on some of these players that are committing to LSU and then deciding to go elsewhere. But I would suggest this. The more often you get into bidding wars with Texas and Michigan, you probably aren't going to win the majority of those. Not saying you'll never win one. Probably not the majority of those. That's my guess. And LSU lost another one today with a decommitment of Cade Phillips from LSU to Texas after Texas has lost his commitment to LSU. So it is what it is. That's my story, and that's the way that I'll feel about it. We're going to talk. This is like I said at the top of the show, as big a year as there is in college football with signing day and with the portal opening and with people deciding how they're going to go about. Now, LSU can't approach kids in the portal right now because it's not open yet, but you'll know who's out there, and you got to start figuring out the ones you need to go after, the ones you can get, and the ones that fit. And we'll see what Brian Kelly and his staff are able to do over the next 2 weeks. That's our Genesis opening drive. When we come back, let's shift gears from that discussion, which we'll return to. Let's talk about a big basketball game tonight. LSU and Florida State, 8 o'clock tip. Nobody's going to jump in the portal between now and the tip. So I think LSU, from a basketball perspective, so we can just focus on the guys that are going to be on the floor. We'll do that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boudreaux's Electrical Services. Neil and Melissa have been running Boudreaux's Electrical for 40 years. They're a certified Generac dealer. They're a premier Generac generator dealer. That means they're in the top 3% nationwide in Generac generator sales. If you're a homeowner, you work from home, you got young kids at the house, or you just want to be comfortable when a hurricane comes through and the lights may be out for 2 days. Any of that applies to you? Generac Generator can help you with all of that. If you are a commercial property owner, a business owner, and you don't want the power to go out at your location, Boudreaux's Electrical Services can help you out with that. Every single generator that they sell you comes with a 7 to 10 year warranty, and they're able to monitor that generator remotely 24/7. So if something happens, mechanical failure, something hits it, knocks it loose, not going to function, they'll know about it before you will. And they'll send somebody out. They got more than 10 techs out in the field. They can handle a repair and get you back up and running so that you have the peace of mind to know that power is not going to go out on you. 985-397-1562 is the same number they've had for 40 years. That's 985-397-1562. Or you can call them at 225-300-9389. 225-300-9389 in Gonzales. Easy way, as I tell you every day, Boudreaux'Electrical.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Glen West, Go 24/7 Sports. Be with us in 15 minutes. Talking Tigers, talk some football with Glen. Certainly hit on some basketball as well. Sonny Ship, an hour from right now, talking recruiting. National Signing Day cranks up tomorrow, so we'll revisit that conversation, not leaving it completely in the rearview mirror, but I will be leaving it completely in the rearview mirror from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock tonight because LSU's got a big basketball game inside the PMAC. Tonight and tomorrow, the ACC and SEC will play 16 games, 10 tonight and 6 tomorrow. Should be really, really exciting stuff over the next couple of days between those two conferences. And LSU and Florida State will get things rolling tonight at 10 o'clock on the SEC Network. 8 o'clock on the SEC Network from Baton Rouge. LSU 6-1 on the season, as you're well aware. Florida State is 7-1. They've only played one Power 5 game. That was a home game against Florida, and it looks like it was a sound defeat that Florida dealt them, but it really wasn't as bad as it looks. They lost the game by 13 points. It was 4 with 2.5 minutes to go, and then Florida boat raced over the last 2 minutes, and Florida State only scored 1 point. So Florida State got that thing really close with about 120 seconds left in the game and couldn't get it to the finish line. So it's a pretty good team. I'll talk about it, but I just kind of wanted to get an overview of the program a little bit here with Florida State. They're coming in. Leonard Hamilton has done a really, really good job at Florida State as the head coach. He's been there for 23 years. He's won 60% of his games over that time. He's been to the Sweet 16 5 different times, including 4 years ago in 2021. But since that year, they've kind of sputtered. The last 3 years, Florida State is 43-53 overall, 27-33 in ACC play. So they've been a bottom-level ACC team over the last couple of years. Hamilton is 76 years old, so it stands to reason he doesn't have a lot of time remaining on the bench there at Florida State. But got to imagine he's got eyes on the NCAA tournament this year, as LSU does. And this is a big game for a couple of teams that don't figure, in my opinion, to factor in at the top of their respective conferences. I don't right now think LSU is going to play with Alabama and Auburn and Tennessee and Kentucky right now. I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope they go 14-4. But I feel like LSU is probably more closer to a 500 team in the SEC, which is good enough to get in the tournament. I think that Florida State is probably bottom half of the ACC, and that makes this a pretty reasonable battle. So let's talk about kind of the 3 things that I'm looking for in this game. The first is Jameer Watkins, who is the best player that Florida State has. He is a second-year player at Florida State, started his career at VCU, and he, after last year when he was an honorable mention All-ACC player, he entered the NBA Combine, tested those waters. Then he entered the transfer portal and ultimately decided to come back to Florida State. He is a 6'7" wing. He can shoot the 3 okay, just over 30% the last couple of years, 33%. He scores 17 points a game for him. He scored 30 in a game against Rice earlier this year, and he can really score at all levels. At 6'7", he can put it on the floor. He's got really long arms. He can get to the rim and finish, and he will shoot occasionally. And I'm curious how LSU defends him. I think Jai Bailey makes the most sense at 6'5". Victorious Miller's got a little more length than that, but he's just a freshman. Cam Carter's a little undersized to run around with Jameer Watkins, but I'm curious how LSU handles Watkins because, like I said, he averages 17.3 points per game, and no one else on Florida State's roster averages 11 points. So he is far and away their go-to scorer, and if you can bottle him up, their offense is going to struggle a little bit. But that's not where their identity is. Their identity as a team is on defense, and that's always been the case with Leonard Hamilton teams. Florida State ranks 9th in the country in defensive efficiency. They're 4th in the country in steals per possession. I mean, you're talking about top 5 in the country in anything in a 330-something team division. That's incredible stuff. So they really get after you with ball pressure and steal the basketball. They're 16th in the country in block percentage, which is also elite. They're 34th in the country in field goal percentage allowed. So they will turn you over. They turned Florida over 19 times in that game in Tallahassee. One, LSU's got to limit that. You can't turn it over 19 times. But two, when you talk about a front court for Florida State that is incredibly long, they've got Malik Hewitt, who's 6'11", and they've got Taylor Bowen, who's 6'10", not to mention they have 2 6'7" wings and a 6'5" point guard. Like, they are a handful at the rim. And then you look at LSU's guards, and you look at Jordan Sears at 5'10", and you look at Cam Carter at about 6'3", they're a lot smaller. They're going to have a lot of size. I mean, Sears is going up against a 6'5" point guard. Carter's going up against a 6'7" wing. Like, that's a lot of size to give up. And so it stands to reason LSU's going to have to make some jump shots in this game. Florida offset the fact that they had 19 turnovers because they made 10 threes. And they did do a good job in the paint as well. And LSU's going to have to rely on that some. But I think you're going to have to knock down some shots against this Florida State defense that is very, very good. The other piece to this puzzle for LSU are slow starts. Listen to this statistic. LSU is 244th in the country in first half points per game. 244. They're 37th in second half points. And that makes a ton of sense because against Northwestern State and Charleston Southern and Alabama State, who are all 197 or worse in the net, you fell behind those three teams in the Maravich Center, 92-80. You were outscored by all three of them. And then you come back and hammer them in the second half. You fell behind Central Florida by 20 in the first half, cut it to 15 at the break. Now you played great in the second half, played great in the second half of all those games. But you've got to start better. You can recover against Northwestern State from a slow start. You can recover against Charleston Southern, and they did recover against UCF, but they can't make a habit of that. And it's going to be really tough to come back against this Florida State defense if you don't get off to a better start. And I talked about this on yesterday's show when we recapped Friday's game. I don't know exactly why they're getting off to bad starts. I don't know if it's intensity, lack of execution, poor game plan, a lack of I don't know what it is. But it's got to change.
So one thing, I listened to the media availability yesterday, and they asked Jalen Reed about that, and he said, I don't know if this is the main reason why, but he said one of the reasons is actually kind of interesting. On offensively, they're on the other half of the floor from the bench.
Sure.
And apparently they've had trouble communicating, play calls or whatever Matt McMahon is trying to communicate with them. They've had issues with that, and that may be leading to some of their offensive struggles in the first half, at least.
All right, let me take that part. I appreciate that. That's good looking out there. If you can't communicate in a Pete Maravich Assembly Center with 2,600 people in it, you got big problems at Auburn and at Florida or wherever. I don't even know what their road schedule is, but that place is a church in November. So I can't. They got to get that cleaned up in a hurry. I know we've got some Matt McMahon sound from his availability yesterday as they get ready for this one against Florida State.
Appreciate everyone being here today. Great opportunity for us tomorrow night against a really good Florida State team. Always have great respect for Coach Hamilton and his teams. They're elite defensively. When you look at the numbers, 5th in the country in block percentage, 4th in steal percentage, 3rd in forced turnovers. They really guard you and are very disruptive on that end of the floor. Offensively, Coach Hamilton always has very balanced teams. They're led by Watkins, who's averaging over 17 a game in just 25 minutes, which is hard to do. And
that's basically kind of how I laid this out for you. One thing that I like in this matchup, if we're just going off numbers, and trust me, I'm well aware that a lot of these numbers are screwy because some teams are really scheduling up in in November. Some teams are not playing anybody, and so you're not. I don't feel great about these numbers until middle of January, but it's all we got. So it's and nobody has 4 starters back from last year on their teams, so it's really the only way we can scout. And Florida State has not shot the 3 ball very well. Watkins, as I mentioned, has shot is 12 of 37 for 32%. Daquan Davis, who plays a lot of minutes for them, is 32%. Chandler Jackson is just 2 for 15. They got a couple guys off the bench who have shot it better. Justin Thomas, which name I can remember because he's a golfer, has been really good, 10 of 21. But they don't shoot it great from 3. And LSU's 3-point defense, if you want to give them a lot of credit for that or not, we've had that discussion already on the show, which is like some of that is chance, some of that's good defense. But if you can hold Florida State to a really poor 3-point shooting night, it's tough to win on the road when you don't knock down shots. So I'm hopeful that LSU can win this game. LSU is a 3.5 point favorite, depending on where you're shopping. Obviously, that number was way out of whack for LSU and Kansas State a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how much Vegas truly knows about every team in the country right now, but I feel like this is based on paper, kind of looking at returning players and production. Feels like a pretty evenly matched game, and one that LSU would do itself a lot of favors to go out there and go ahead and win. So we'll see. It'll be an 8 o'clock tip-off in the PMAC. Reminder, they've got great concessions deals between 7 and 8, so an hour before tip-off when the PMAC opens on Tuesday nights. They've got awesome concessions deals, so get on in there a little bit early and see if LSU can't get another Power 5 win. They got 2 Big 12 teams that they've beaten. They'll play 2 ACC teams coming up in Florida State and SMU. This one at home. We'll see what LSU can do in this one. Let's take a timeout, come back and chat with Glen West. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. When you think luxury, think Genesis of Baton Rouge. Absolutely a luxury line of vehicle, and part of that is the safety. The entire line was given the IIHA top safety picks. Some of them were top safety picks plus. So whether you're in the market for a sedan, whether you're in the market for a midsize SUV or a full-size SUV, they've got you covered at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Get on by the dealership, Airline at PQ. If you're shopping for a new car in Baton Rouge, it stands to reason you'll probably be on Airline Highway. Just make one more stop at Genesis. Tell them you heard about them on the Hunt Palmer Show. Get behind the wheel with one of their brand ambassadors and just see for yourself the style, the comfort, the sleekness. It's all fantastic there at Genesis of Baton Rouge. And don't think, well, it's a luxury vehicle, I probably can't afford that. Reasonable prices, luxury vehicles. That's the model over at Genesis. Every car on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
I simply can't keep up with the news. It just never stops. Every time I refresh my phone, there's something else that we got to talk about or put up at LouisianaSports.net. Or it's a crazy week here in college football. The latest news: Deshaun Womack, former 5-star and defensive end who's been in Baton Rouge for 2 years, has entered his name. Well, he hasn't entered the transfer portal. He's declared that he's going to enter the transfer portal when that opens up, coming up in a week. So let's talk about that with Glen West. Go 24/7, covers LSU on the field and in recruiting. Joins us every Tuesday on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Glen, how are we doing?
I'm just trying to keep up, Hunt. I'm just like you, just like everybody else that covers this team. Just trying to keep up. So, yeah, another tough loss there for LSU to watch Womack enter the transfer portal.
Well, let's just talk about some of this stuff that we've seen today. The 2 names that we've seen enter the transfer portal that I can think of: C.J. Daniels and Deshaun Womack. Maybe there are others, but start with those 2. And are those surprising? How big of losses are those for LSU moving into 2025?
Yeah, I would say certainly starting off with CJ, that is a loss. I mean, you listen to Brian Kelly literally 8 days ago say, how happy they are with him and just what he's been able to play through this year and how impactful he's been in the locker room. And here we are 8 days later and talking about all the indications were that he was going to be back for this team in 2025, and he's expected to enter the transfer portal. So all of a sudden this wide receiver room is just emptying by the day here. I mean, you talk about some of the players that they're going to be losing to the draft, whether it's Kyron Lacy, some of the guys they could be losing due to eligibility. So like, and then obviously now with the transfer portal with CJ Daniels and Landon Ibieta, those are two of the four that have entered or have gone official so far. You're looking at this roster, you're looking at this room, and you're like, okay, what's left? I mean, you've got Aaron Anderson and you've got Xavier Thomas as kind of the two primary guys that played a lot of football for you last year in that room, or I should say in 2024 in that room. So I'm looking around and I'm saying they've got to hit the transfer portal hard. They've got to go get a wide receiver one, and then they probably also got to go get another impact wide receiver out of the portal. I think they now need at least two guys here on December 9th when this thing opens up for them to be really aggressive with and go add to this receiver room to help, whether it's Garrett Nussmeier that comes back or whoever is the quarterback next year, because right now they just do not have the guys. They have some promising young talent. They have some guys coming in, whether it's Philip Wright or for the moment, Derek Meadows. I'm not sure that people really expect Meadows to hang around, but we're certainly in an era here where LSU has to go hit on a couple of portal wide receivers, and I think we're at the point also where LSU's got to put its money where its mouth is. Like they've lost too many guys here now to where you can realistically say, like, okay, this thing looks great right now. This looks like we're in a really strong position. They have to go out and they have to go add some really high caliber players at a number of positions, and that includes wide receiver. It now includes edge rusher. Certainly, I think you'd like to see them add some O-linemen as well. So a lot of work to be done here over the next 4 weeks to kind of make this roster a more competitive one in 2025.
The guys in front of Womack had pretty good years. Savion Jones and Braden Swinson played very well, and Deshaun Womack didn't play very much. He had 2.5 sacks in his career at LSU. How big a loss do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a loss because you're looking at the future here, and those guys kind of being out of eligibility and moving on. You figured a guy like Womack would be the successor and would start the next 1 or 2 years in that position. So certainly a loss there with Womack. He obviously is a guy with a lot of talent. Was somebody that I think was still working through stuff off the field to kind of get to a place where he could see the field a little bit more. But he's very talented. He's a big guy, and every time he did see the field, I think he made his presence felt for the most part, but he just didn't see the field all that often because you couldn't really justify taking Braden Swinson off the field to put Sean Womack on the field. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of where LSU goes from here. I know things seem dark and bleak right now because this is kind of the time where everybody's leaving, and it's like, what's the plan? How are they going to go out and they're going to address these things? I will say, like, I think we need to hold off total judgment until kind of this month finishes out and just kind of see who they bring in, who they have to replace those guys. I'm looking at the current roster right now. Gabe Relaford makes a ton of sense as a guy that needs to be developed and stick around and be a potential starter next year at one of those edge position players. But they certainly have to go add, at least 1 or 2 more guys now on the edge, in addition to what you have to go get at receiver, at running back, at cornerback, at safety. I mean, there's a lot of positions right now that I think LSU is going to need to attack in the portal, and we'll see if they can be as aggressive as Brian Kelly seems to think they will be.
Do you think Brian Kelly's philosophy on program and roster building has changed over the last 2 months? Because, he talked routinely about how we're going to do this from the high school ranks.
Yeah, I don't know how it can't, or how it, just by what they've lost here over the last couple of weeks. I mean, not even just the last couple of months, but just the last couple of weeks here. You've watched the number 1 quarterback leave your class. You've watched, now a top 5 cornerback and at 2 positions of need that you need for this future of this roster. They've gone and taken some money from other programs. We could certainly see some more movement here over the next 24 hours with more guys potentially leaving, guys that you're hoping can stick around in this class. So I do. I think that they've had to maybe have some of those tough conversations the last couple of weeks about how they want to approach this thing, and it's going to be interesting what they decide. I mean, like they don't have a lot of avenues right now to improve from a freshman class standpoint. There's Solomon Thomas, the offensive lineman, who's out there. You've got Jakeem Stewart, the defensive lineman out of St. Aug, or I should say Carr. But those are kind of the big 2 that I think are left from a freshman perspective, and they would fill positions of need for sure. But you've got to go out and you've got to get some veteran experienced talent that's played at the Power 5 level. And I think, Brian Kelly's been hesitant to pour all those resources into that angle of this, but when you're pouring all your resources for an entire year, bringing Cade Phillips and Bryce Underwood to campus 8, 9, 10 times, and then the 11th hour to see those guys go to different programs, it's got to be crushing. I mean, it's really got to be a huge, huge blow to what you're trying to build here. So I think they have to have a little bit of that mind shift change here, where it's got to be a free agency, and you've got to go out and you've got to go get guys on a 1-year, 2-year rental and try to compete year in, year out in that kind of structure.
What did you think when Brian Kelly said that there are going to be some impact guys that are going to announce that they're coming back to LSU? What did that trigger in your mind?
Yeah, I think that there's some cases that can be made now. Certainly some money is freeing up here as guys kind of leave the program for you to maybe make some of that retention cases a little bit stronger. I know that there's conversations going on right now with Emory Jones about maybe possibly getting him back. I think that would be a huge addition. Certainly Garrett Nussmeier is a guy that we've talked about. You have to get back. I mean, I don't know if there's a really great option out there, even if you go in the portal and say that this quarterback's definitely better than Garrett Nussmeier. I think that they need him back, and they need a year of development from him to really be a complete offense next year. And then the other one's Mason Taylor. I mean, I think that's, kind of reaching for the fences a little bit there with Mason, but if you can put together a compelling enough offer to bring him back for his senior season, he was the guy that Nussmeier leaned on in pretty much every reliable circumstance this year. It was him and Aaron Anderson that he really looked to on those third downs, those fourth downs, every time they needed a big conversion. So if you're able to convert or get Mason Taylor back in the fold, that's extra gravy on top there for retention standpoint. But those are kind of the three that stick out to me right now. I'm sure if we kind of dive into this further a little bit down the line, there might be a couple other guys that rise to the surface in terms of retention. But those are kind of the three main impact guys that I think come to mind from an offensive perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking Harold Perkins. I was thinking potentially Chris Hilton, who has another year. And there are others, and you just kind of figure out what those guys' plans are. The only thing that the most difficult part when I consider this from the outside, because I don't know what the conversations are like. You just have to hope, if you are a coach, that at least high schoolers and players in your team are being truthful with you. And if they are, and they make a decision, you can react to that. But if you get caught off guard, which I'm assuming happens sometimes, that's tough to recover from, because you can only take someone on their word.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that Brian Kelly was talking about with CJ Daniels 8 days ago, I don't know what's changed there over the last 8 days, but it seems like that was a pretty reverse course there of thinking in terms of what's gone on the last week plus. So yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear what's your thoughts on the transfer, the freshmen and the transfers and all that stuff. I'm sure you've gotten into it a little bit with your show here, but just it's got to be so crushing when you recruit a guy for over a year as a high schooler, and then at the 11th hour for you to lose him because of something that's out of your control in terms of just other programs paying them more money. I think it has to kind of alter your line of thinking of how you build rosters going forward, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's year to year. I mean, it's just a 1 year. Sure. Just because you get a high school player, we got him locked in for 3 years. No, you got him in for a fall. You got him for 4 months. So that's what you've got to consider there. And so you got to allocate money, and everybody's got a different amount of resources. One of the things I talked about yesterday, I have a hard time really jumping all over LSU's coaching staff if you're getting commitments from players and then they leave for money and you're not allowed. If you want to blame the ownership of the Yankees for not signing Juan Soto, well, it's their money. It's not Brian Kelly's money. He can only offer what is available to him. So it's hard for me to get on the coach or the staff when guys decommit and go elsewhere, because there's very little he can do to control that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a relationship business until somebody throws a big pile of money at a player that they just can't say no to. So, I mean, it's getting to a point here where, rev sharing can't get here soon enough, but at the same time, what's to keep this from still happening even when rev sharing does get here. Like I've always looked at rev sharing is like a thing that will help with player retention. It'll help maybe with some portal guys, but for those freshmen and for those high school recruits that you're trying to get in here, there's nothing that can stop an outside endorsement or a donor to come out and throw a big pile of money at a player and tell them that it's a piece of the future kind of thing here where you can come in and be marketable as a player. So it's very, very different times we're living in here. And, these next 24 hours, 48 hours for sure are going to be really interesting to see how this 2025 class plays out.
Tell me what you think about tonight in the PMAC, LSU and Florida State.
Yeah, big time opportunity for Matt McMahon's crew. Certainly you look at, kind of the first half and second half disparity of scoring. Florida State's a team that turns opponents over, top 5 in the country. So LSU's going to have to be able to hold on to the ball, get good shot creation. I think their creators, in particular, Jordan Sears and Cam Carter, those guys are going to have to stay out of foul trouble to really give LSU a good shot in this one. But, I think that they've played with a lot of aggression and have been a lot more physical offensively with the ball here the last couple of weeks. And I really like kind of the direction they're going in. And this would be another big staple moment for Matt McMahon's crew if they're able to get this win.
We'll see you in the PMAC tonight. Thanks, Glenn.
All right. Thanks. Sorry for the outside stuff.
You're all good.
You'll probably hear that coming through.
It's all good. Glen West, senior writer over at Go 24/7, with us every single Tuesday, and he'll be all over this, all the things that are going on in LSU's football program right now, and certainly will be in the PMAC tonight for LSU and Florida State. We'll come back and close out hour number 1. I got a thought on the college football playoff. We'll do that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Vaughn and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. If you haven't thought about closet space or you're not happy with your closet space in your current house, you don't have to move like we did to enhance your closet situation. You can just customize a closet to your exact specifications. I can see a lot of folks that don't have quite enough room. They got a suitcase, maybe it doesn't fit. They got to put it upstairs. They don't have enough room for their coats, so those have to go into another room. It's just a mess. Use that space more efficiently or create a whole new custom space. With David Duvall and his team, it'll look fantastic and it'll function exactly the way that you want it to. If you're concerned about paying for it, they've got financing options available. 0% for 18 months if you qualify. It's all online at onebathandclosets.com. You can start with that free consultation with David and his team today. Do it. It's One Bath and Closets. onebathandclosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
All right, closing up hour number 1. Still plenty to do in hour number 2 here on this Tuesday. Busy Tuesday here. Already talked a lot about LSU and the recruiting front, Cade Phillips' decommitment, and what things are looking like tomorrow. We'll do that more in hour number 2 with Sonny Shipp of 24/7 Sports. Got a basketball preview in a little bit earlier, and Glen West good enough to hop on there during a busy time for him as well. Look, and we'll get to Will Campbell declaring for the draft and what the draft decisions are to come. But tonight, the college football rankings, and these are the first ones that I would consider significant because most teams aren't playing this weekend. I shouldn't say. There are a lot of teams most teams that are playing this weekend feel like they're already in the power conferences. And then you've got teams that are on the outside looking in that can't play in these games that would like to get into the playoff. Basically 3 teams from the SEC and Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. And they'll be kind of monitoring what goes on with SMU and what goes on in the and so I think it's interesting to see how those teams will stack up. And I also was looking at those 3 teams based on resume and kind of considering how I would stack them. And I don't have a strong criteria. The only thing I reject is that we have to go based on 1-loss record. Now, you got to be careful when you're evaluating the 1-loss record because not every win is equal and not every loss is equal. But I reject the notion that just because SMU went 11-1, that they're automatically in over the 3 SEC teams. I do not see it that way. So if they lose, I want to have that discussion. I don't want to just go, 11-1, just like Texas went 11-1. They lost. They're in. SMU went 11-1. I want to vet that out a little bit further. And you can't just look at head-to-head. And I know that's a big, big detractor from the South Carolina resume, but I also think it should be kind of how you've played. And South Carolina's losses are significantly better than Ole Miss's losses. I mean, you've got an Ole Miss loss at home to Kentucky, who's one of the worst teams in the league. Alabama goes up and just non-competitive with Oklahoma. Like, that should matter. And I'm not telling you I would definitely put South Carolina over them, but I'm willing to look at it even though those two teams beat South Carolina. I think the entirety of the body of work needs to speak. And I would love to be in that room to kind of have that full subjective conversation. When we turn it objective into that's you're 11-1, you're 11-2, you're 9-3, like that's when I start to push back because not all 9-3s are the same as the same. And I want to see who you've beat. Mostly I want to see how good is your good. And then I do want to weigh in how bad some of your losses are. And I think eye test and all that stuff matters. And we've got room to get some good teams in. And I'm just curious to see how it shakes out tonight. Because tonight will tell us the story, in my opinion, of the three SEC teams and how they stack up. And you got Alabama coming off an okay performance, Ole Miss coming off an okay performance, and South Carolina going on the road and beating Clemson. So I think it's interesting to pay attention to those three as we get into championship weekend. All right, we'll take a timeout for Sports Center. If you missed any of the first hour today, you can catch it on demand. 1045ESPN.com's on demand tab, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you find your sound, you can always find us. Open things up with Will Campbell's. Open things up with Cade Phillips' decision today to decommit from LSU. We talk some hoops, talk to Glen West. You can find all that on demand. Hour number 2 is coming up after Sports Center. We will start with draft decisions for LSU. Will Campbell's made his. There are more to come. What I think is coming in those. Sonny Ship is going to be with us to talk some recruiting. We'll also talk Saints with Sharif Ishak. Hope your work week's off to a good start. We'll step away for Sports Center. We'll come back with a second hour of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website. Jonathan Carbo and his team, fantastic to work with. They do commercial property and casualty insurance as well as group and employee benefits. As far as P&C goes, I know in my experience in insurance, a lot of business owners don't know a ton about what their insurance program says. They know what the premium is. They know how much comes out each month, but they don't know about the coverages. And the time to understand that is on the front end, not after the hurricane, not after the cyber breach, not after the bad car accident. And then you got to go in and what are the exclusions? What are my limits here? What do I owe? What's my deductible? And if you don't know that, you can start to scramble a little bit. And that's the spot you don't want to be in. Trust your insurance broker to put your business in the right place. They will do that at the Highland Insurance Group. Jonathan Carbone's team right here in Baton Rouge. Check him out online, HighlandIG.com.